and there was then Mom and Dad bought the Viney farm, which was on the property that's right now Reimer. What's where
It's the internet.
where Reimer's subdivision there, where the Tim Hortons is. What's that called? Reimer something. Anyhow, that was Viney's property, and the Viney property went from the red house where the Earhart Electric has their windmill right now, north to the valley, to the dump, and east then to the hill in the Rosebud Valley as well. Mm-hmm. So from that road, on the other side of the road to the west of that is Emily Moyle's property, and she went from the edge of town north along the railroad track up to the valley as well. So the Viney property and the Emily Moyle property were side by side, and that's how I remember those properties. So Dad and Mom bought the property off of Mrs. Viney. Mrs. Viney had a invalid, handicapped daughter that she looked after called Loretta, who was bedridden, and Mrs. Viney looked after her all those years. So I remember that. Also remember when Dad and Mom bought that property, they started a little farm. Even though we lived in town, we lived at the house that was on the I don't know. Anyhow, when we were in Acadie Valley and got to move to Didsbury, Dad and Mom said, we've bought a property that has a park beside it. And that was a real exciting thing because it was an empty lot with trees on it, and that was the park. That was pretty good to go from living in a little, pretty small little house in Acadie Valley, east of southeast of Oyen, Alberta, to this house with a two-story house with a park beside it. Was pretty exciting for us little gaffers. So anyhow, from there, when I was a young teenager, then Mom and Dad built another house. We called it the Blue Roof House, that was just on the west side of the hospital. So I don't know the address there, but anyhow, that was a pretty nice new place for us. It was never finished completely by Dad, but Dad was a carpenter by trade, a preacher in his earlier days, and he actually built a number of houses, most of which didn't get finished, but this one got probably the farthest finished of any of them.
So can you tell us what it was like when you were a kid growing up here?
Well, I remember walking to school. We would go go from that first house we lived in. I remember walking to the train tracks, going to the house or the school. The classroom was in where the museum is now. The building that the museum is in was this first school I went to. And we would actually have to climb through the train cars, or through the hitch on the train cars to get to school, unless we went away around where the train was disconnected on Main Street there on 20th Avenue. But most of us kids on the east side of the tracks.
The wrong side.
The wrong side of the tracks, yeah. Had to, crawl over the railroad track. So we would always make sure that there wasn't an engine hooked up to it and ready to move it just as we're ready to go. Because there was a lot of cars on the sidings at that time, those two sidings in the main track. So, but yeah, I went went to school in the old red brick. Well, I guess not the old red brick one. It's the actual sandstone one. The museum is in.